Nearly 3 millennia ago, in the rugged hillside villages of ancient Greece, a blind poet named Homer breathed life into two epics that would define the Western imagination. First came the Iliad, a roar of bronze and blood. It chronicled the 10-year siege of Troy, where legends like Achilles and Hector clashed for survival. It gave us Helen, the face that launched 1,000 ships, and Odysseus, the master of shadows and schemes, whose hollow wooden horse finally brought the city to its knees. But if the Iliad was a song of war, the Odyssey is a song of the soul. It is the story of a man facing horrors far worse than any spear tip. Here, we leave the grand battlefields for a more intimate struggle, a husband fighting to return to his wife, a father desperate to meet a son he barely knows, and a mortal using every ounce of his wit to survive a world where the gods themselves have turned against him. What kept the cleverest man in Greece wandering for 10 long years? What curse did the Cyclops lay upon his name? How did he hear the siren's song, the melody that kills, and live to tell of it? We must follow him as he descends into the lightless pits of Hades to speak with the dead, and ask why the goddess Athena championed him while Poseidon, lord of the tides, hungered for his ruin. And through it all, we look to Ithaca, to Penelope, who stood alone against 100 vultures who invaded her home and demanded she forget her king. The sea remembers everything. It remembers the wooden ships with their painted eyes, the men who sang as they rowed, the blood that darkened its surface when Troy finally burned. And somewhere in the wine-dark waters between myth and memory, between history and imagination, the sea remembers a man who spent 10 years trying to get home. Prologue. The Wooden Horse. Odysseus never sought the glory of the blade. When the heralds of the Greek kings arrived at the rocky shores of Ithaca to draft him for the war to reclaim Queen Helen, they found a king who had lost his mind. Odysseus was found ploughing his fields with salt instead of seed, yoking an ox to a donkey, and raving at the clouds. It was a brilliant performance, a desperate gamble to stay with his family. His wife, Penelope, watched from the palace gates, clutching their infant son, Telemachus. She saw the lie for what it was, a shield of madness meant to protect their peace. But the herald, Palamedes, was no fool. He sensed a trap. To break the ruse, Palamedes snatched the baby from his mother's arms and cast him directly into the path of the heavy plough. The mask shattered. Without a second thought, Odysseus wrenched the blade aside, saving his son but condemning himself. In that single act of fatherly love, his sanity was proven. Caught in his own web, he was forced to honor his oath and sail for Troy. For a decade, Odysseus lived in the shadow of Troy's impregnable walls. Every morning, the salt air reminded him of home. Every night, the faces of his wife and son grew more spectral. While others relied on fury, Athena, the goddess of wisdom, saw in Odysseus a kindred spirit. She whispered in his ear, favoring the warrior who preferred a clever word to a heavy shield. After 10 years of stalemate, while the Greek leaders sat exhausted on the sand, Odysseus looked at the eternal walls and saw a way in. "We will build a horse," he proposed. "A gift so grand the Trojans will invite their own destruction through their gates." It took 3 days to raise the wooden beast, 30 feet of pine and ship's timber, its hollow belly hiding 29 of Greece's deadliest men. When the sun rose on the 4th day, the beach was empty. The Greek fleet had vanished. Believing the war over, the Trojans dragged the offering into their city with songs of victory. Under the cover of a drunken midnight, Odysseus and his men descended from the horse's belly. They silenced the guards, threw wide the gates, and let the returned Greek fleet pour into the sleeping streets. By dawn, Troy was a memory of smoke and ash. Odysseus had won the war not with 1,000 ships, but with a single thought. As he stood at the prow of his ship, watching the coast of Troy fade, Odysseus believed the nightmare was over. He was a hero, a victor, a man finally returning to his son. But the gods were not finished with him. Ahead lay a journey that would take as long as the war itself, a voyage to the edge of the world and back. This is the tale of that journey. This is how the cleverest man in Greece finally came home. The story begins, as all the best stories do, in the middle of disaster. 10 years after the fall of Troy, Odysseus is still not home. The war ended. The other heroes sailed back to their kingdoms, to their wives, to their lives. Agamemnon returned to Mycenae and was murdered in his bath by his wife and her lover. Menelaus got Helen back and sailed home to Sparta. Nestor made it to Pylos. Diom's to Argos. Even the lesser warriors, the men whose names are barely remembered, found their way home or died trying. But Odysseus, the cleverest of them all, the man who thought of the Trojan horse, the strategist who won the war, he is trapped. Not literally trapped, not at first. He and his men set sail from Troy with 12 ships, hearts full of plunder and the anticipation of reunion. The voyage should have taken weeks, perhaps a month if the winds were unfavorable. Instead, it will take 10 years. And of the roughly 600 men who left Troy with him, not one will see Ithaca again except Odysseus himself. The ancient Greeks who first heard this tale would have understood immediately what was happening. Odysseus had angered the gods. Not Zeus, father of gods and men, who actually favors Odysseus for his cleverness. Not Athena, goddess of wisdom, who loves him like a daughter loves a father, who intervenes on his behalf whenever she can. No, Odysseus has earned the eternal hatred of Poseidon, lord of earthquakes, shaker of the earth, master of the sea. And Poseidon has all the time in the world to make one man suffer. The crime was this: during the war, during those 10 brutal years before the walls of Troy, Odysseus encountered the Cyclops Polyphemus, and through cleverness and violence, he blinded the creature. The Cyclops was Poseidon's son. And gods, whatever else they may be, are nothing if not vengeful on behalf of their children. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. The Odyssey is not told in order. Homer begins his epic with Odysseus already 7 years into his wandering, trapped on an island with the nymph Calypso, who loves him and will not let him leave. It is only later, through flashback and storytelling, that we learn what happened in those years between Troy's fall and Calypso's island. This structure, beginning at the end and working backward, would influence storytelling for 3 millennia. Every film that starts with the climax and then shows you how we got there owes a debt to Homer. So let us start where Homer starts, in the halls of Olympus, where the gods are gathering in council. Zeus speaks, musing on the nature of mortals, how they blame the gods for their suffering when so often they bring disaster upon themselves through their own folly. And yet, even as he says this, he acknowledges that Odysseus suffers not because of his own mistakes but because he blinded the Cyclops, because he earned Poseidon's wrath. The god of the sea is away, visiting the distant Ethiopians, and in his absence, Athena seizes her chance. She pleads with Zeus to let Odysseus finally go home. Zeus agrees. He sends Hermes, the messenger god, to Calypso's island with orders: release Odysseus. Let him build a raft. Let him sail for home. Calypso will obey, reluctantly, bitterly, but she will obey because even immortal nymphs cannot defy the will of Zeus. But while Hermes speeds toward Calypso's island, Athena has another task. She descends to Ithaca, disguised as a mortal, to visit Odysseus' son. Telemachus is 20 years old now, born just before his father sailed to war. He has never known his father except through stories, through the tales old men tell of the hero who went to Troy. And Ithaca, in his father's absence, has fallen into chaos. You need to understand what Ithaca is to understand what has been lost. It is not a great kingdom. It is a rocky island off the western coast of Greece, poor in resources but rich in strategic location. Odysseus rules it and the surrounding islands, Same, Dulichium, Zacynthus, as overlord. Before the war, this was enough. His palace was prosperous. His wife Penelope was renowned for her beauty and wisdom. His son was born healthy. Life was good. But 20 years is a long time. 10 years of war. 10 years of waiting. And in all that time, no word from Odysseus. No message, no sign, no confirmation that he even still lives. Other heroes have returned and told their tales. They confirm that Odysseus survived the war, that he sailed from Troy, that his ships were seen leaving harbor. But after that, nothing. Silence. The kind of silence that, year after year, begins to feel like death. And so the suitors have come. Over 100 of them, young nobles from Ithaca and the surrounding islands, have taken up residence in Odysseus's palace. Officially, they are courting Penelope, trying to convince her to choose one of them as her new husband. In reality, they are parasites, consuming the palace's resources, slaughtering its livestock, drinking its wine, harassing its servants, treating Odysseus's home as their own private feast hall. They have been doing this for 3 years. Penelope has resisted with every tool available to her. She cannot simply refuse them all. Tradition and politics demand that as a widow, if indeed she is a widow, she must eventually remarry. But she can delay. And so she has delayed, using the same cleverness that her husband is famous for. She announced that she could not remarry until she finished weaving a burial shroud for Odysseus's elderly father, Let's. Every day, she would weave at her loom. Every night, in secret, she would unravel what she had woven. For 3 years, this worked. Until one of her maids betrayed her, and the suitors discovered the trick. Now the pressure is unbearable. The suitors demand that she choose. They grow more aggressive, more entitled, more certain that Odysseus is never coming back and that one of them will be the next king of Ithaca. And young Telemachus, barely more than a boy, watches his inheritance being devoured and can do nothing to stop it. This is the situation when Athena arrives, disguised as Mentes, an old friend of Odysseus. She finds Telemachus sitting outside the palace, daydreaming, imagining his father suddenly appearing and driving the suitors away. Athena sits beside him and speaks words that will change everything. "Your father lives," she tells him. "He is detained somewhere, held against his will, but he lives. And you, Telemachus, must stop being a boy. You must become a man. Call an assembly. Confront the suitors publicly. Then take a ship and sail to Pylos and Sparta. Seek news of your father from Nestor and Menelaus, the heroes who knew him best. Find out what happened after Troy." Telemachus has been waiting his entire life for permission to act. Athena gives it to him. The next morning, he calls the first assembly Ithaca has seen in 20 years. The suitors attend, arrogant and dismissive. Telemachus speaks with a passion that surprises everyone, including himself. He denounces the suitors, demands they leave his house, appeals to the community's sense of justice. The suitors respond with mockery and veiled threats. But something has shifted. Telemachus is no longer a child sitting passively while his inheritance is stolen. He is Odysseus's son, and he is beginning to understand what that means. With Athena's help, disguised now as Mentor, another of Odysseus's old companions, Telemachus secures a ship and crew. That night, while the suitors drink themselves into stupor, he sails quietly from harbor, bound for Pylos, the kingdom of old Nestor, seeking any news, any hope, any confirmation that his father might still be alive. And far to the west, on an island beyond the edge of the known world, Odysseus sits on the beach, as he has sat every day for 7 years, staring at the horizon, weeping for home. Calypso found him when his last ship wrecked, when his final crew drowned, when he washed ashore more dead than alive. She is beautiful beyond mortal comprehension, a nymph who will never age, never die. She lives in luxury in a cave decorated with vines and flowers, where springs bubble with crystal water, where the air always smells of cedar and citrus. She has offered Odysseus immortality, an eternity at her side, freedom from death and pain and loss. All he has to do is stop trying to leave. Stop yearning for Ithaca. Stop remembering his wife. He refuses. Every single day, he refuses. Calypso cannot understand this. She is more beautiful than Penelope. She is immortal. She can give him pleasures no mortal woman can offer. What is Ithaca compared to paradise? What is a mortal wife who is aging, who might even be remarried by now, who has probably forgotten him? But Odysseus would rather be mortal in Ithaca than immortal anywhere else. This is not romantic sentiment. This is something deeper, something about identity and belonging. He is Odysseus of Ithaca. Without Ithaca, without his wife, without his son, without his kingdom, he is no one. Immortality with Calypso is not eternal life. It is eternal erasure, becoming a pet, a curiosity, a mortal who surrendered his mortality for comfort. He would rather die trying to get home than live forever in exile. And now, finally, his chance has come. Hermes arrives with Zeus's command. Calypso rages, not at Odysseus, but at the gods, at the double standard that allows male gods to take mortal lovers but condemns goddesses who do the same. Her fury is impotent. She cannot defy Zeus. She finds Odysseus on the beach, tells him he is free to go, and, because she cannot help herself, warns him that worse suffering awaits him on the sea. She offers one last time to make him immortal. He refuses one last time. Odysseus builds a raft, working with tools Calypso provides, cutting timber, binding it with ropes, raising a mast, weaving a sail. It takes 4 days. On the 5th day, he launches the raft, provisions loaded, and sails east toward home. For 17 days, the sea is kind. He navigates by the stars, keeping the constellations in their proper positions, sailing with a skill born of decades of experience. He is finally going home. And then Poseidon returns from Ethiopia, sees Odysseus on the sea, and remembers his rage. The god rises from the ocean depths, his trident gleaming, and the sky darkens. Poseidon does not need to strike Odysseus directly, that would be too merciful, too quick. Instead, he calls the winds. East wind and south wind, west wind and north wind, all at once, tearing the sea into mountains of water and valleys of foam. The waves grow higher than houses, higher than temples. Odysseus's raft, so carefully constructed, begins to disintegrate. He clings to the mast as the sail is torn away. He wraps his arms around the timbers as the ropes snap. The raft breaks apart beneath him, and he is thrown into the churning water, armor dragging him down, salt water filling his lungs. He surfaces, gasping, and a wave the size of a city wall crashes over him, driving him under again. This is how heroes die, he thinks. Not gloriously in battle, not surrounded by comrades, but alone in the dark water, forgotten, unmourned. But he does not die. Because another goddess is watching. Ino, once a mortal woman, now a sea deity, takes pity on him. She appears beside him in the water, the ancient sources say she looked like a seabird, and gives him her veil. Wrap this around your chest, she tells him. Abandon the raft. Swim. The veil will keep you afloat. When you reach land, throw it back into the sea. Odysseus hesitates. He has learned not to trust divine gifts, not to abandon what he knows for what he is promised. But another wave crashes over him, and the raft breaks apart completely, and he has no choice. He strips off his heavy cloak, ties the veil around his chest, and begins to swim. For 2 days and 2 nights, he swims. Poseidon's storm gradually subsides, even gods grow tired, but the sea remains violent, and Odysseus is pushed further and further from any course he might have plotted. His arms move mechanically. His legs kick without thought. He is beyond exhaustion, beyond pain, in that place where the body continues functioning after the mind has surrendered. Twice he sees land and is driven away by waves that smash him against rocks. The third time, he finds a river mouth, and the river god, every river had its god in the Greek imagination, calms the water enough for Odysseus to drag himself onto shore. He collapses in the sand, more dead than alive, and manages only to throw the veil back into the water as promised before unconsciousness takes him. He crawls into the underbrush, covers himself with leaves, and sleeps the sleep of a man who has nothing left to give. He wakes to voices. Female voices, young, laughing. For a moment, still half in dreams, he thinks he is home, that he hears Penelope and her maids. Then reality returns. He is naked, caked in brine and sand, his body a roadmap of scars and bruises. And somewhere nearby, women are playing. This is the kingdom of the Phaeacians, though Odysseus does not know it yet. The Phaeacians are a blessed people, favored by the gods, living in isolation at the edge of the world where they have never known war. Their king is Alcinous, wise and just. Their ships are the fastest in the world, so fast they need no pilots, guided by thought alone. They are, in many ways, the opposite of everything Odysseus has experienced for the past 20 years. They are what life looks like when the gods are kind. The girl leading the group is Nausicaa, King Alcinous's daughter. She and her maids have come to the river to wash clothes, and afterward they are playing with a ball, their laughter echoing across the water. Odysseus watches them from the bushes and faces a dilemma. He needs help. But he is a naked, scarred, salt-crusted stranger emerging from the wilderness. If he appears suddenly, they will scream and run. He needs to be careful, diplomatic, to use the only weapon he has left, his words. He breaks off a branch to cover himself and steps into view. The maids scream and scatter, exactly as he feared. But Nausicaa stands her ground. There is something about her, courage born of innocence, perhaps, or divine inspiration, for Athena is never far from Odysseus, that allows her to see past the frightening exterior to the man beneath. Odysseus speaks to her with a careful mix of flattery and humility. He compares her to Artemis, goddess of the hunt. He acknowledges his own wretched state. He asks only for directions to the city and perhaps some clothing. He does not demand. He does not threaten. He is a suppliant, placing himself under her protection and, by extension, under the protection of Zeus, who watches over all who seek hospitality. Nausicaa responds with a maturity that surprises even her maids. She orders them to give Odysseus clothing, to feed him, to let him bathe in the river. She cannot bring him directly to the palace, that would be improper, would start rumors, but she gives him instructions. Follow the road to the city. Enter the palace. Go directly to my mother, Queen Arete, and clasp her knees as a suppliant. If she shows you kindness, my father will grant you whatever you need. Odysseus does as instructed. He enters the city in wonder. The Phaeacians have built something extraordinary here, a civilization untouched by the violence that has consumed the Greek world. The palace is magnificent, with bronze walls and golden doors, silver doorposts and golden handles. The gardens never sleep, producing fruit in every season. Inside, King Alcinous is hosting a feast, as he does every evening, for the Phaeacian nobles. Odysseus enters unseen, Athena shrouds him in mist, and walks directly to Queen Arete. He kneels, clasps her knees, and the mist dissipates. The entire hall falls silent. A stranger has appeared in their midst, a suppliant claiming their protection. The nobles are uncertain. Who is this man? Where did he come from? Is he a threat? But hospitality is sacred. King Alcinous, after a moment of stunned silence, rises and welcomes Odysseus. He offers him a seat, orders food and wine, and promises to help him reach his home, wherever that may be. He does not ask the stranger's name, that would be rude, pressure on a man who has clearly suffered greatly. Instead, he offers shelter for the night. Tomorrow, they will hold a feast in the stranger's honor, and tomorrow the stranger can tell his story. That night, Queen Arete notices something. The clothing Odysseus wears, she recognizes it. It is from her own household, the clothes she gave to Nausicaa for washing. How did this stranger come by them? Odysseus, always clever, tells the truth but carefully. He was shipwrecked. Her daughter showed him kindness. Nothing improper occurred, he speaks this firmly, protecting Nausicaa's reputation. Arete is satisfied. Alcinous is impressed. This is clearly a man of quality, despite his current circumstances. The next day, the Phaeacians hold games in honor of their guest. There is running and wrestling, boxing and discus throwing, competitions that allow the young nobles to display their prowess. Odysseus watches but does not participate. He is exhausted, still recovering, and besides, it would be presumptuous to compete in someone else's kingdom. But one of the young nobles, drunk on youth and wine, challenges him. Are you really a warrior, old man? Or just a merchant who's never done anything but count cargo? The insult stings. Odysseus rises, and without warming up, without ceremony, he picks up a discus heavier than any the Phaeacians have used and hurls it so far that it lands beyond all other marks. The throw is impossibly good, a throw that reveals years of training, a warrior's strength, a hero's skill. The nobles fall silent. They have been insulting someone extraordinary. Alcinous smooths over the awkwardness. He calls for music, for dancing, for entertainment. A blind bard named Demodocus takes up his lyre and begins to sing. And he sings, as fate would have it, about the Trojan War. He sings about a quarrel between Odysseus and Achilles, about the tension in the Greek camp, about the heroes who fought before Troy's walls. And Odysseus begins to weep. He covers his face with his cloak, trying to hide his tears, but Alcinous notices. The king understands something now. This is no ordinary stranger. This is someone connected to the war, to Troy, to the stories Demodocus sings. Alcinous stops the music. He turns to his guest with a new respect and a direct question. Who are you? What is your name? What is your city? And why do you weep when you hear of Troy? The hall falls silent. Everyone waits. And Odysseus, who has hidden his identity since arriving, who has been so careful to reveal nothing, makes a decision. These people have shown him kindness. They deserve the truth. He stands, and when he speaks, his voice carries the weight of 20 years of suffering. I am Odysseus, son of Laertes, king of Ithaca. I am known among men for my cunning, and my fame reaches to the heavens. I have been trying to reach home for 10 years since Troy fell. Let me tell you what happened, why the gods have punished me, why I alone of all the heroes have not yet reached my home. And so, over the course of the evening and into the night, Odysseus tells his story. Not the tale of homecoming, not yet, but the tale of wandering. And the Phaeacians listen, transfixed, as he describes wonders and horrors beyond their imagining. We left Troy, he begins, with 12 ships and full crews. The winds were favorable at first. We raided the Cicones for supplies, a brutal business, but war had made us brutal, and lost several men in the counterattack. Then the winds turned against us. A storm drove us south and west, away from all known lands, into waters where no Greek ship had sailed before. For 9 days we were blown across the sea. On the 10th day, we reached an island, and the people there welcomed us. They were peaceful, strange, offering us fruit that grew wild in their meadows. My men ate the fruit eagerly. We were hungry after days of storm, and something terrible happened. The fruit was the lotus, and anyone who ate it forgot everything. Forgot home, forgot family, forgot that they had ever wanted anything except to stay on that island eating lotus flowers forever. I had to drag my men back to the ships by force. They wept and fought me, begging to stay, and I had to tie them to the rowing benches until the effects of the lotus wore off. We left that island quickly, understanding that not all dangers come with teeth and claws. Some dangers are gentle, offering peace and forgetfulness, and those might be the most dangerous of all. From there, we sailed to another island. We saw smoke from fires, suggesting inhabitants, and I took 12 men ashore to investigate while the rest of the crew stayed with the ships. We found a massive cave filled with pens for sheep and goats, racks of cheese, buckets of milk. Everything suggested a shepherd of enormous size. My men wanted to take supplies and leave quickly. I refused. I was curious. I wanted to see what kind of man lived here, what gifts he might offer guests. It was pride, and pride would cost us dearly. The owner of the cave returned at evening, driving his flocks before him. And he was not a man. He was a cyclops, a giant with one eye in the center of his forehead, a creature of immense strength and utter savagery. His name was Polyphemus, and he was the son of Poseidon. He rolled a boulder across the cave entrance, a boulder so massive that 20 men could not move it, trapping us inside. Then he saw us. And instead of offering the hospitality that gods and men hold sacred, instead of welcoming strangers as guests, he grabbed 2 of my men, smashed their heads against the cave floor, and ate them. Raw. While they still screamed. We could not fight him, he was too large, too strong. We could not escape, the boulder was too heavy. We could only watch in horror as he ate 2 more men for breakfast the next morning, then drove his flocks out, rolling the boulder back into place behind him, trapping us again. I spent that day planning. There was a massive olive wood club in the cave, green wood still seasoning. I took a section as long as a ship's mast and spent hours sharpening it, hardening the point in the fire, hiding it under sheep dung. When Polyphemus returned that evening and ate 2 more of my men, I approached him with a wineskin I had brought from the ships. Strong wine, undiluted, the kind that must be mixed with water or it will knock a man senseless. I offered it to the Cyclops as a gift. He drank it eagerly, he had never tasted anything like it, and demanded more. I gave him more. He drank until he was drunk, and in his drunkenness, he asked my name. I told him my name was Nobody. He laughed and said he would eat nobody last, and that would be his gift to me. Then he collapsed into a stupor. We retrieved the stake, heated the point in the fire until it glowed red, and drove it into his single eye. The Cyclops screamed, a sound so loud it seemed to shake the island. Other Cyclopes, living in caves nearby, rushed to his door and called out. "What's wrong, Polyphemus? Who is hurting you?" "Nobody," he screamed. "Nobody is killing me." "Then it's nothing," they replied. "If nobody is hurting you, it must be a sickness from the gods. Pray to your father Poseidon." And they left him to his agony. Blind now, Polyphemus still blocked the cave entrance. But in the morning, he had to let his flocks out to graze. He rolled back the boulder and sat in the entrance, hands outstretched, feeling each sheep as it passed to make sure no men escaped with them. But I had planned for this. We tied ourselves beneath the sheep, 3 men under each animal, clinging to the wool. The sheep passed through. Polyphemus felt their backs but not their bellies. And we escaped. We ran for the ships, drove the stolen flocks aboard, and began rowing away. And then, this is where my pride destroyed me, I called back to the Cyclops. I mocked him. I revealed my true name. I am Odysseus, I shouted, king of Ithaca, sacker of cities. Remember the name of the man who blinded you. Polyphemus hurled a boulder that nearly sank my ship. Then he prayed to his father Poseidon. Father, he cried, let Odysseus never reach home. Or if he must reach home, let him arrive late, in misery, having lost all his companions, and let him find trouble in his house. Poseidon heard that prayer. And everything that has happened since, all the storms, all the suffering, all the years of wandering, stems from that moment of pride when I could not resist boasting to a monster I had defeated. The Phaeacians sit in stunned silence as Odysseus pauses. This is only the beginning of his tale, they realize. The beginning of years of horror. And they lean forward, hungry for more. Odysseus drinks deeply from his wine cup, the Phaeacians have kept it filled throughout his tale, and continues. His voice has grown quieter now, as if the memories themselves are exhausting. We sailed from the Cyclops' island with heavy hearts, he says. 6 men lost to Polyphemus' appetite, and a curse hanging over us like storm clouds. But we were still alive, still together, still believing we could make it home. The gods, in their mercy or their cruelty, gave us one more chance. We came to an island floating in the sea, wrapped in bronze walls. This was Aeolia, home of Aeolus, keeper of the winds. The gods had given him dominion over all the winds that blow across the earth, and he could release them or bind them at will. He welcomed us with extraordinary kindness. For a full month, we feasted in his halls while he asked questions about Troy, about the war, about the heroes and their fates. He was lonely, I think, living on his floating island with only his children for company. Our stories were a gift to him, and he repaid that gift generously. When we prepared to leave, Aeolus gave me a leather bag, oxhide sewn tight and bound with silver cord. Inside, he said, were all the winds that might blow us off course, the west wind, the north wind, the south wind, all imprisoned and harmless. He left out only the west wind, which would blow us directly home to Ithaca. With this gift, he said, you will be home in 9 days. And we nearly made it. For 9 days and 9 nights, I steered the ship myself, not trusting anyone else with the task. I did not sleep. I did not rest. I watched the horizon, felt the wind on my face, and with each passing day, my hope grew stronger. On the 9th day, we saw land. Ithaca. We were close enough to see the beaches, to see smoke from cooking fires rising from the island. I was so close to home that I let myself believe the nightmare was over. And in that moment of relief, exhaustion finally overcame me, and I fell asleep. My men had been watching the leather bag. They had been whispering among themselves, wondering what treasures Aeolus had given me. Gold, they decided. Silver. Gifts that I was keeping for myself while they received nothing. It was not greed exactly, or not only greed. It was resentment born of exhaustion, the feeling that they had suffered as much as I had and deserved to share in any reward. While I slept, they opened the bag. All the winds exploded out at once. The ship was blown backward, away from Ithaca, in a storm more terrible than anything Poseidon had yet thrown at us. I woke to chaos, to my men screaming, to Ithaca disappearing behind us. We were blown back across the entire journey, 9 days of progress lost in minutes, until we found ourselves once again at Aeolia. I went ashore alone and begged Aeolus for help. I told him what had happened, how my men's foolishness had undone his gift. He stared at me with something like pity and something like fear. "The gods hate you," he said. "I can see it now. I was wrong to help you. Leave my island and never return. Whatever you have done to earn such divine wrath, I want no part of it." So we sailed on, rowing now, for we had no favorable wind. We were broken, demoralized, understanding that we were not going to have easy escapes, that the gods were not finished with us. And the next land we reached taught us that some horrors have nothing to do with divine punishment. Some horrors are simply the world being what it is. The land of the Laestrygonians appeared peaceful at first. A harbor surrounded by towering cliffs, a narrow entrance that seemed to promise safety. We sailed into that harbor, all 12 ships together, and anchored close to shore. I alone kept my ship outside, tied to a rock at the harbor entrance. Some instinct warned me. Some memory of the Cyclops made me cautious. I sent scouts inland to investigate. They found what appeared to be a normal city, with people going about their daily business. But the Laestrygonians were not normal people. They were giants, cannibals, and when they saw my scouts, they saw prey. One scout was grabbed and eaten immediately. The other 2 ran back toward the harbor, screaming warnings. The Laestrygonians followed them to the cliffs above the harbor. And then, methodically, they began hurling boulders down onto the ships below. Imagine it! 11 ships trapped in a narrow harbor, surrounded by cliff walls, with nowhere to run. The boulders smashed through hulls, snapped masts, crushed men where they stood. Those who jumped into the water were speared like fish. The Laestrygonians harvested them, I later learned, carrying the bodies back to their city for feasting. My ship survived only because we were outside the harbor. I cut the anchor rope and screamed at my men to row faster than they had ever rowed, while boulders crashed into the water around us. We escaped. But we were now one ship, one crew, perhaps 45 men left of the 600 who left Troy with me. The enormity of that loss was almost paralyzing. 11 ships gone in minutes. Men I had fought beside for a decade, men I had promised to bring home, all dead. We rowed in silence for days after that. No one sang. No one joked. We simply pulled the oars and tried not to think about the empty ocean behind us where there should have been 11 other ships. The next island we reached was Aeaea, home of the goddess Circe. We did not know she was a goddess at first. We anchored and spent 2 days on the beach, too exhausted and traumatized to explore. On the 3rd day, I climbed a hill to survey the interior and saw smoke rising from a house in the forest. We cast lots to see who would investigate, and the lot fell to Eurylochus, my second-in-command, who took half the remaining men inland. They found Circe's house, surrounded by wolves and lions that acted strangely tame, almost friendly. Circe herself appeared beautiful, welcoming, singing at her loom. She invited them inside, all except Eurylochus, who suspected a trap and hid outside. She gave them food and wine, and when they drank, she struck them with her wand and transformed them into pigs. Not metaphorical pigs, actual swine, though their minds remained human, trapped in animal bodies, aware of what had been done to them. Eurylochus ran back to the ship in terror and told me what he had seen. I took my sword and went alone to confront Circe. On the way, I encountered Hermes, the messenger god, who had been sent by Athena to help me. He gave me a plant called moly, with black roots and white flowers, which would protect me from Circe's magic. He also gave me instructions. When she tries to transform you, rush at her with your sword drawn. She will be terrified. No mortal has ever resisted her magic. She will offer you her bed. Accept, but make her swear by the gods that she will not harm you or unmake you while you are vulnerable." Everything happened exactly as Hermes predicted. Circe gave me drugged wine. I drank it, and nothing happened. She struck me with her wand, commanding me to join my companions in the pigsty. I drew my sword instead and rushed at her. She fell back in shock and fear, recognizing that I was protected by divine power. "Who are you," she asked, "that can resist my magic?" "You must be Odysseus. Hermes told me you would come here one day." She swore the oath I demanded, swore by the river Styx that she would do me no harm. Then she restored my men to human form, not just restored them but made them younger, stronger, more handsome than before. And she invited us all to stay as her guests for as long as we wished. We stayed for a year. Odysseus's voice carries a complex mixture of emotions now, guilt, perhaps, at having delayed so long, but also something like gratitude. After so much horror, Circe's island was a sanctuary. We feasted every day. We rested. We healed, at least in body if not in spirit. Circe and I became lovers. This was part of the oath, part of the compact, and she bore me a son, though I would not know of his existence until much later. But a year is a long time, and eventually my men began to question why we remained. "We have wives," they reminded me. "Children. Parents. We did not survive this long only to live forever in comfort on a witch's island." They were right, of course. We had to leave. When I told Circe we were departing, she did not argue. But she did warn me. "Your path home leads through waters more terrible than any you have yet crossed," she said. "Before you can return to Ithaca, you must travel to the land of the dead. You must cross the river Ocean to its farthest shore and enter the house of Hades. There you must speak with the prophet Tiresias, who alone can tell you how to appease Poseidon and reach your home. The land of the dead. The underworld. No living man goes there and returns." But I had no choice. Circe gave me detailed instructions: where to sail, what rituals to perform, what offerings to make. And the next morning, with heavy hearts, we departed. The journey to the underworld was unlike any other sailing. We followed Circe's directions, sailing always north and west, beyond the edge of the sun's path, until we reached a shore wrapped in perpetual mist where no light ever penetrated fully. This was the entrance to Hades, the realm of the dead, and it was as terrible as any description could suggest. I performed the ritual Circe had taught me. I dug a trench and poured libations, milk, honey, wine, water, and then I sacrificed a ram and a ewe, letting their blood flow into the trench. And the dead came. They rose from the earth like smoke, drawn by the blood, desperate for even a taste of life. Ghosts, shades, the pale remnants of people who once lived. I held them back with my sword, allowing none to drink until Tiresias appeared. The old prophet, blind in life and blind in death, came forward. I let him drink the blood, and it gave him enough substance to speak. He told me truths I did not want to hear. "Poseidon will never stop hating you," he said. "The path home is possible, but narrow. When you reach the island of Thrinacia, you will find the cattle of the sun god Helios. Do not touch them. No matter how hungry you are, no matter how desperate, leave those cattle alone. If you harm them, your ship will be destroyed, your men will die, and you will reach home alone, late, in misery, to find your house full of trouble." This was Polyphemus's curse, coming true through Tiresias's prophecy. But Tiresias gave me more. He told me what I would find when I finally reached Ithaca: men in my house, courting my wife, consuming my wealth. He told me I would have to kill them all. and he told me something strange about my future, about a journey I would have to take after reclaiming my kingdom, an inland journey carrying an oar until I reached people who had never seen the sea. Only then would my wanderings truly end. I thanked him, though the knowledge he gave me was bitter. And then other ghosts came forward to drink the blood and speak. I saw my mother, Antic Lee, and learned that she had died from grief during my absence, never knowing if I lived or died. We spoke, or tried to speak, but I could not embrace her. 3 times I tried to hold her, and 3 times she slipped through my arms like shadow. The dead have no substance, no warmth. They are memory and regret given form. I saw Agamemnon, the great king who led the Greeks at Troy. He told me how he was murdered by his wife when he returned home, killed in his own bath while he was helpless. He warned me to be cautious when I reached Ithaca, to arrive secretly, to trust no one until I understood what waited for me. I saw Achilles, the greatest warrior who ever lived, who chose a short glorious life over a long peaceful one. I praised him, told him how his name was sung by poets, how his glory would never fade. He responded with words that haunt me still. I would rather be a living slave, he said, laboring for a poor man, than king of all the dead. Glory means nothing here. Life is everything. I saw Ajax, who had been my friend before we quarreled over Achilles' armor after his death. I tried to speak to him, to apologize, to reconcile. He turned away and walked back into the darkness without a word. Some wounds cannot be healed, even in death. I saw Heracles, or his shade, the real Heracles, Circe later told me, had been taken to Olympus to live among the gods. And I saw the ancient criminals suffering their eternal punishments. Tantalus, standing in water that receded when he tried to drink, beneath fruit trees that pulled back when he reached for them, forever hungry, forever thirsty. Sisyphus, pushing his boulder up a mountain only to have it roll down again, forever straining, forever failing. There were others, countless others, but eventually I could bear no more. I returned to my ship and we sailed away from that terrible shore, back toward the world of the living, carrying knowledge that made our burden heavier. We returned briefly to Aeaea, where Circe gave us final warnings about the dangers ahead. First, she said, you will encounter the sirens. These creatures sing with voices so beautiful that no man can resist. They sit on an island surrounded by the bones of sailors who heard their song, steered toward them, and were shipwrecked on the shore. You must pass them, but you must not listen. Fill your men's ears with wax. If you wish to hear their song, have your men tie you to the mast and command them not to release you no matter how you beg. After the sirens, she continued, you must pass through a narrow strait. On one side is Scylla, a monster with 12 feet and 6 long necks, each ending in a hideous head with 3 rows of teeth. She lives in a cave high on the cliff face, and when ships pass beneath her, she strikes, taking 6 men, 1 for each head. On the other side is Charybdis, a whirlpool that swallows the sea 3 times a day and spews it back. If your ship gets caught in Charybdis, you will all die. But Scylla will take only 6 men. Sail close to Scylla's side. Sacrifice 6 to save the rest. There is no other way through. Finally, she said, you will come to Thrinacia, the island where the sun god Helios keeps his cattle. These are immortal cattle, sacred to the god, and they must never be harmed. No matter what happens, no matter how hungry you become, do not touch those cattle. If you do, you will lose everything. We departed Aeaea for the last time, and everything Circe predicted came to pass, exactly as she said it would. The sirens came first. As we approached their island, the wind died completely, some magic of theirs, perhaps, ensuring that ships would linger within range of their voices. I took the beeswax Circe had given me and softened it in my hands, then pressed it into my men's ears, sealing them against all sound. Then, as I had decided, I had them bind me to the mast. I wanted to hear the sirens. I wanted to know what song was worth so many sailors' lives. The song began when we were still some distance from the island. It started as a whisper, barely audible over the splash of oars, then grew stronger, clearer, more beautiful than any music I had ever heard. But it was not just the beauty of the voices. It was what they sang. They sang to me personally, calling me by name, promising knowledge. They knew everything, they sang. Everything that happened at Troy, everything that happens anywhere in the world. They could teach me secrets that even the gods do not share freely. All I had to do was come ashore, rest, listen. I wanted to go. Every part of me wanted to go. I screamed at my men to untie me, to steer toward the island. I begged, threatened, promised rewards. My men, deaf to the song and to my commands, simply rowed harder. 2 of them came and tied more ropes around me, binding me tighter to the mast. I fought against the bonds until my wrists bled. And slowly, gradually, the song faded as we passed beyond the island's reach. When my men finally removed the wax from their ears and untied me, I collapsed on the deck, shaking, understanding now why the shore was piled with bones. The sirens promise knowledge, but they deliver death. And the promise is so seductive that men choose death willingly. We had barely recovered when we entered the strait between Scylla and Charybdis. I could hear Charybdis before I saw her, a terrible roaring as the whirlpool sucked down the sea, creating a vortex that reached down to the seafloor, exposing rocks and sand that should never see sunlight. Then, minutes later, the water exploded upward in a geyser of foam and spray. 3 times a day, Circe had said. We would have to time our passage carefully. I steered close to Scylla's cliff, as Circe had instructed, though I did not tell my men what I was doing. How could I? How could I tell them that I was deliberately sailing close to a monster that would kill 6 of them? I armed myself, took up 2 spears, and watched the cave high on the cliff face, hoping desperately that I might be able to fight Scylla, to protect my men through skill and courage. I could not. Scylla struck faster than thought, 6 necks snaking down from her cave simultaneously, and 6 men were plucked from the deck. I saw them rising into the air, screaming my name, reaching toward me, and there was nothing I could do. They were carried into the cave, and their screaming stopped. We rowed past, and I did not look back. I could not look back. Those 6 men died because I chose their deaths over the deaths of everyone. It was the right choice. It was the only choice. And it will haunt me until I die. Odysseus's voice breaks here, and the Phaeacians see tears on his face. King Alcinous starts to speak, perhaps to tell him he can stop, that he has told enough, but Odysseus raises a hand. No. I need to finish. You need to understand why I am the only one left. We came to Thrinacia, the island of the sun god's cattle, exhausted and demoralized. Circe had warned us. Tiresias had warned us. I warned my men, do not touch the cattle, do not even think about it, we will stay only long enough to rest and then we will leave. They swore oaths. They promised. But the gods were not finished testing us. We had food for perhaps a week. We planned to stay 3 days. But the winds turned against us. South wind, east wind, every direction except the one we needed. Days became weeks. Weeks became a month. Our food ran out. We caught fish, we hunted birds, but it was never enough. And all around us, fat cattle grazed, immortal and perfect, belonging to the sun god. I prayed to the gods for guidance, for relief, for anything. And one day, exhausted from praying, I fell asleep. While I slept, Eurylochus convinced the men to kill the cattle. "We're going to die anyway," he told them. "We will starve here or die at sea. At least if we eat the sacred cattle, we die with full bellies. And if we somehow make it home, we can build a temple to Ilios, offer him rich sacrifices, make amends. But if we die here of hunger, what temple can we build then?" It was rationalization, the kind of desperate logic that hunger produces. The men agreed. They slaughtered the finest cattle, made offerings to the gods, though what good are offerings when you are offering the gods their own property, and feasted. The smell of roasting meat woke me, and I knew immediately what had happened. I ran to the beach and saw the slaughtered cattle, saw my men eating, and I understood that we were finished. You cannot steal from the gods. You cannot kill what belongs to Ilios and expect to survive. For 6 days, we feasted on the sacred meat. On the 7th day, the winds finally changed, blowing from the west. We loaded the ship quickly and set sail, desperate to get away from the island before divine retribution arrived. We sailed for less than a day before Zeus sent the storm. This was not like Poseidon's storm, not a natural weather pattern weaponized. This was direct divine punishment. The sky turned black. Lightning struck the mast, shattering it. The ship filled with sulfurous smoke. Thunder crashed so loud it felt like the world was ending. And then a lightning bolt struck the center of the ship, and everything ended. The ship broke apart. My men were thrown into the water, and they floated there briefly, looking like sea birds scattered across the waves, before they drowned. All of them. Every single man who had survived the Laestrygonians, survived Scylla, survived everything else, gone in moments because they killed the sun god's cattle. I survived by clinging to debris, the keel and the mast, which I lashed together into a crude raft. For 9 days, I drifted. The current carried me back, mockingly, past Scylla and Charybdis. I passed Charybdis while she was swallowing the sea, and I clung to a fig tree that grew above her cave, hanging there for hours while my makeshift raft was sucked into the whirlpool. When Charybdis finally spat the water back up, my raft came with it, and I dropped from the tree, landed on the wreckage, and paddled away with my hands. On the 10th day, I washed up on Calypso's island. She found me, took me to her cave, and told me she would never let me leave. And for 7 years, I was her captive, her lover, her pet. She offered me immortality, but I refused. Every day I refused. Because I would rather die as Odysseus of Ithaca than live forever as no one. Until you, he says, looking at King Alcinous and Queen Arete. Until your kindness freed me from her island. And now I ask only what I have been asking for 10 years. Help me reach home. Give me a ship, and I will trouble you no more. The hall is completely silent. The Phaeacians are stunned by the magnitude of what they have heard. This is not just a travel story. This is an epic of suffering, of divine punishment, of human endurance pushed beyond all reasonable limits. King Alcinous speaks slowly, carefully, with the weight of his words fully considered. Tomorrow, he says, we will give you the finest ship in our fleet. We will load it with gifts worthy of a hero, bronze and gold, fine clothing, everything you have lost and more. Our sailors, who need no pilot and whose ships think for themselves, will carry you home. And when you wake, you will be on the shores of Ithaca. That night, Odysseus sleeps in a proper bed for the first time in years, in a palace where he is treated as an honored guest rather than a prisoner or a beggar. And the next day, true to their word, the Phaeacians load a ship with treasures. They place Odysseus on board. He is so exhausted that he falls asleep immediately, and the ship departs. The Phaeacian ships are unlike any other vessels in the world. Homer tells us they are as fast as thought, that they know their destination without being steered, that they can cross vast distances in a single night. Whether this is magic or merely the poetry of describing exceptional seamanship, we cannot know. But the result is clear: when Odysseus wakes, he is home. Except he does not know it. Athena has wrapped Ithaca in mist, disguising it, and Odysseus wakes on an unfamiliar shore surrounded by treasure, convinced that the Phaeacians have betrayed him, that they have dumped him on some random beach and stolen his gifts. He counts the treasure frantically. It is all there, and then he collapses in despair. Another strange land. Another delay. Will he ever truly reach home? And then Athena appears. She has been protecting him throughout his journey, though she could not act openly while Poseidon's anger still burned. But now, finally, she reveals herself. "You are home," she tells him. "This is Ithaca." And now the real work begins. She tells him what he already knows from Tiresias's prophecy: his house is full of suitors courting Penelope, consuming his wealth, plotting to kill Telemachus if the boy becomes too much of a threat. Odysseus cannot simply walk into his palace and announce his return. The suitors would kill him before he could act. He must be clever, disguised, patient. He must assess the situation, identify his allies, plan his revenge carefully. Only then can he reclaim his home. Athena transforms him with a touch. His skin becomes weathered and old. His thick hair falls out or turns grey. His strong body becomes stooped and weak. He is no longer Odysseus the hero. He is an old beggar, homeless and nameless, someone the suitors will not even notice. She hides his treasure in a cave, tells him to seek out his loyal swineherd Eumaeus who lives in the hills, and promises that Telemachus, who is sailing back from Sparta, will arrive soon. Together, father and son will plan the destruction of the suitors. Odysseus makes his way to Eumaeus's hut. The swineherd does not recognize him, but he offers the hospitality that is sacred in Greek culture: food, wine, a place by the fire, and he speaks bitterly about the situation in the palace. "The suitors are destroying everything," he says. "They slaughter our best livestock daily for their feasts. They mock the queen and threaten the prince. If only Odysseus would return, if only he still lived, we would see justice done." Odysseus, still disguised, claims to have news of Odysseus. He spins a tale about being a Cretan who met Odysseus recently, who knows that the king is alive and will return soon. Eumaeus wants to believe but cannot let himself hope. Too many lying strangers have come to Ithaca with false stories, trying to gain favor with Penelope by claiming her husband's lives. Better not to hope, Eumaeus says, than to be disappointed again. While they talk, Telemachus arrives. Athena has guided him past an ambush the suitors set for him on his return voyage. He comes to Eumaeus's hut first, seeking news, and finds his father there, though he does not recognize him. Odysseus watches his son, 20 years old now, a man he barely knows, and feels emotions he cannot name. Pride, certainly. Love. But also grief for the years lost, for the childhood he missed, for the boy who grew up fatherless because his father was trapped by gods and his own mistakes. When Telemachus leaves briefly to arrange affairs, Athena appears to Odysseus again. "It is time," she says. "Tell him who you are." She touches him, restoring his true appearance, not completely, but enough that he looks like himself, younger, stronger, unmistakably Odysseus. When Telemachus returns and sees this stranger transformed, he thinks it is a god and backs away in fear. But Odysseus stops him with words that break the heart of anyone who hears them. "I am no god. I am your father. I am Odysseus. And I have come home." Telemachus does not believe it at first. How can he? His father is a story, a memory, a ghost that has haunted his entire life. But gradually, through tears and embraces, through questions and answers, belief comes. Father and son reunite after 20 years, and they weep together, Homer says they cried more than eagles whose chicks have been stolen from the nest. It is a grief mixed with joy, loss mixed with return, 20 years of absence compressed into a single moment of recognition. Together, they plan. The suitors number more than 100. Odysseus and Telemachus are two men. But they have surprise, they have Athena's help, and they have righteousness on their side. They will return to the palace, Odysseus still disguised as a beggar. He will assess the situation, identify which servants remain loyal and which have betrayed him. And when the moment is right, when the trap is set, they will strike. The next day, Odysseus walks into his own palace. 20 years have passed since he last saw these halls. He built parts of this palace himself, carved the bedpost of his marriage bed from a living olive tree. He knows every stone, every passage. But now it is occupied by strangers, by young men who treat his home as their own, who sit in his chairs and drink his wine and mock his memory. They see him as he enters, this old beggar, and they laugh. Antinous, the worst of the suitors, throws a footstool at him. It strikes Odysseus in the shoulder, and he does not even flinch. He simply looks at Antinous with eyes that promise death, though the arrogant young man does not see it. Other suitors are less cruel but no less dismissive. They allow him to beg for scraps, to sit by the door, to be humiliated. They do not know they are mocking their king. And then an old dog lying in the courtyard raises its head. The dog is ancient, covered in ticks and sores, barely alive. His name is Argos, and he was Odysseus's hunting dog 20 years ago. No one has cared for him since Odysseus left. He has been lying in this courtyard for years, waiting. And now, somehow, through the disguise that fools every human, Argos recognizes his master. The dog wags his tail weakly. His ears prick up. He tries to rise but cannot. Odysseus sees him, and, though he cannot break his disguise, cannot acknowledge the dog openly, tears run down his face. He walks past, and behind him, Argos lays his head down and dies. He has held on for 20 years, waiting for his master to return. Now that Odysseus is home, Argos can finally rest. This moment, buried in the middle of Homer's epic, has made readers weep for 3,000 years. It is such a small thing, a dog's death, in a story full of monsters and gods and battles. But it captures something essential about the Odyssey. This is not really about adventures. It is about loyalty, about memory, about the bonds that time and distance cannot break. Argos remembered when everyone else forgot. Odysseus makes his way deeper into the palace, and eventually he encounters Penelope. She has summoned him, this old beggar who claims to have news of her husband. He sits before her, and he spins another tale. He is a Cretan, he met Odysseus years ago, he knows the king is alive and will return soon. Penelope listens carefully. She has heard such stories before, but something about this beggar is different. She tests him, asks him to describe Odysseus's appearance, the clothes he wore when he left. The beggar describes everything perfectly, details that no stranger could know. Penelope weeps. She wants to believe, but she has trained herself not to hope. Still, she treats the beggar with exceptional kindness. She orders her old nurse, Eurycleia, to wash his feet, a mark of honor usually reserved for important guests. And Eurycleia, who raised Odysseus from childhood, notices something as she washes his feet. A scar on his leg. A scar from a boar hunt when Odysseus was a boy. She knows this scar. She knows this man. She gasps, almost cries out his name, but Odysseus grabs her throat and pulls her close. Silence, he whispers. If you reveal me now, if the suitors learn I am here, everything is lost. Eurycleia nods, understanding, and keeps the secret. But now there are three who know, Odysseus, Telemachus, and the old nurse. The trap is set. Soon, very soon, the killing will begin. But Penelope has her own plan, one that she has been considering for weeks, perhaps months. She can delay the suitors no longer. The pressure has become unbearable. They have discovered her trick with the shroud. They grow more aggressive daily. They have threatened Telemachus openly. She must choose a new husband, or they will take her palace by force and kill her son. But Penelope is Odysseus's wife, and she is every bit as clever as he is. If she must remarry, she will do it on her terms. The next day, she makes an announcement. She will hold a contest. Odysseus, before he left for Troy, had a great bow, a gift from a friend, so powerful that no ordinary man could string it. The bow has hung unused in the palace for 20 years. Penelope declares that she will marry whichever man can string this bow and shoot an arrow through 12 axe heads set in a row. It is a test Odysseus performed easily when he was young, showing his strength and skill. Let the suitors prove they are his equal. The suitors eagerly agree. This is their chance to end the uncertainty, to claim both the queen and the kingdom. They do not understand that Penelope has designed an impossible test, that she is gambling everything on the hope, the desperate, unlikely hope, that if Odysseus somehow still lives, if he somehow has returned in disguise, he will be the only one who can accomplish this feat. The day of the contest arrives. Telemachus sets up the axes in the great hall, sinking them into the floor in a perfect line. The suitors take turns attempting to string the bow. They pull and strain, rub the bowstring with fat to make it more pliable, heat the bow by the fire to make the wood more flexible. Nothing works. The bow is too strong. One by one, they fail. Some cannot even begin to bend it. Others manage to curve the wood slightly but cannot get the string into place. Antinous, the leader of the suitors, tries and fails. Eurymachus, second in arrogance only to Antinous, fails as well. As the strongest men exhaust themselves, Odysseus, still disguised as an old beggar, quietly instructs Telemachus and the loyal swineherd Eumaeus to lock the palace doors. No one can leave. Then he nods to another loyal servant, the cowherd Philoetius, to remove the women servants who have been sleeping with the suitors, who have betrayed Penelope and Odysseus. The servants are confused but obey. The trap is tightening. Finally, when the suitors have all failed and are exhausted, Odysseus stands. "Let me try," he says. The suitors burst into laughter. An old beggar thinks he can string a bow that defeated the finest young men of Ithaca? It is absurd. It is insulting. Antinous moves to throw him out physically, but Penelope intervenes. "Let him try," she says. "What harm can it do? If by some miracle he succeeds, I will give him fine clothes and gifts, though I will not marry a beggar. My contest is for the suitors alone." Odysseus takes the bow in his hands. He examines it carefully, running his fingers along the wood, checking for damage from years of disuse. The suitors watch with contempt, expecting him to fail immediately. And then, with a casual ease that shocks everyone watching, Odysseus strings the bow. He does not strain. He does not struggle. He simply flexes the weapon, loops the string into place, and plucks it. The sound it makes is like a lyre string, pure and clear, and in that sound is a promise of death. The suitors' laughter dies. They begin to understand that something is very wrong. Who is this beggar? How does he possess such strength? Before they can react, Odysseus picks up an arrow, notches it, and without even standing from his seat, shoots through all 12 axe heads. A perfect shot. Impossible for any normal man. The kind of shot that only one person in the world could make. Odysseus looks at Telemachus and nods. His son grabs weapons they have hidden nearby. And then Odysseus turns to face the suitors, and when he speaks, his voice is no longer the voice of a beggar. It is the voice of a king, of a warrior, of a man who has survived 20 years of war and wandering and has finally come home to find his house violated. "The contest is over," he says. "Now for another target, one that no man has hit before." And he shoots Antinous through the throat. The arrogant young man dies instantly, his wine cup still in his hand, blood spraying across the feast table. The other suitors leap to their feet in panic and rage. They reach for weapons, but the weapons are gone. Telemachus removed them the night before, on Odysseus's instructions. They are unarmed, trapped in a locked hall with a man who has a bow, arrows, and 20 years of rage. Odysseus reveals himself then. "I am Odysseus," he declares, "king of Ithaca. You have been eating my food, courting my wife, plotting to kill my son. You thought I was dead. You were wrong. And now you will pay for every insult, every theft, every moment of suffering you have caused my family." The suitors panic. Some try to beg for mercy. Eurymachus offers to repay everything they have consumed, to pay compensation, to gather treasure from all their families. Odysseus refuses. "There is no price that can buy your way out of this," he says. "You will all die today. The only question is whether you die begging like cowards or fighting like men." A few suitors have the courage to try fighting. They overturn tables to use as shields, they grab whatever makeshift weapons they can find. But they are facing Odysseus with his bow, Telemachus with a spear, Eumaeus and Philoetius armed and loyal, and Athena herself watching from above, occasionally deflecting a blow that might otherwise have found its mark. It is not a battle. It is an execution. Odysseus shoots arrow after arrow, each one finding its target. When his arrows run out, he takes up a spear and continues the slaughter. The great hall becomes a charnel house. Bodies pile upon bodies. Blood pools on the floor where wine pooled yesterday. The suitors who tried to hide are dragged out and killed. Those who begged for mercy receive none. Odysseus has been merciful to his enemies before. He showed compassion to defeated Trojans, he tried to spare lives when he could, but not here, not today. These men violated his home, threatened his family, and consumed his legacy. For this, there is only death. The few servants who betrayed Penelope, who slept with the suitors and mocked their queen, are dragged out and hanged. Melanthius, a goat herd who actively helped the suitors and insulted Odysseus, receives a punishment so brutal that Homer describes it in detail, meant to shock: his nose and ears cut off, his hands and feet severed, left to die slowly. It is savage, excessive, the kind of violence that makes modern readers uncomfortable. But Homer is not sanitizing his hero. Odysseus has become, in some ways, as monstrous as the monsters he fought. 20 years of violence have left their mark. You cannot survive what he has survived without becoming harder, colder, more willing to inflict suffering. When the killing is finished, when every suitor lies dead and the hall reeks of blood and death, Odysseus orders the remaining loyal servants to purify the hall with sulfur and fire. The bodies are dragged out. The blood is scrubbed away. It is practical work, but it is also ritual, cleansing the pollution that the suitors brought, restoring order to a house that has been in chaos for years. And then, finally, Eurycleia climbs the stairs to Penelope's chambers. The queen has been sleeping through the slaughter. Athena cast a deep sleep over her, protecting her from the horror unfolding below. Eurycleia wakes her gently and speaks words that Penelope has been waiting 20 years to hear. "Your husband is home. Odysseus has returned. The suitors are dead. Come down and see him." Penelope does not believe it. She has trained herself too well not to hope. has heard too many false reports, has been disappointed too many times. It is a trick, she says. Or a dream. Or a god disguised as Odysseus. It cannot be real. Eurycleia insists. I saw his scar, she says. The scar from the boar hunt when he was young. It is truly him. But Penelope will not let herself believe without proof. She descends to the great hall and sees a man sitting by the fire, covered in blood, exhausted. He looks like Odysseus. He has Odysseus's scar. He knew to string the bow, knew to shoot through the axes. But Penelope has lived with uncertainty for too long to accept appearance as truth. She needs absolute certainty, irrefutable proof that this is her husband and not some divine impostor or talented deceiver. She sits across from him in silence, studying him. Odysseus waits patiently, understanding her caution, respecting it even. Telemachus is frustrated. Mother, he says, how can you sit there and not embrace him? How can you be so cold? But Odysseus stops him. If this is truly my wife, he says, she has her reasons for testing me. We will know each other soon enough. Finally, Penelope speaks to Eurycleia, loud enough for Odysseus to hear. Move his bed out of the bedroom, she says. Make it up with blankets for him here in the hall. She watches Odysseus carefully as she says this, waiting for his reaction. And Odysseus reacts. He reacts with shock and anger, the first genuine emotion she has seen from him. Move the bed? That is impossible. I built that bed myself, around a living olive tree that grew in the courtyard. I cut away the branches, carved the trunk smooth, made it the bedpost. I built the entire bedroom around that tree. The bed cannot be moved unless someone has cut through the olive tree. And if someone has done that, then everything has changed, and I do not know my own home anymore. This is the proof Penelope needed. No one except Odysseus knows about the olive tree, about how the bed was constructed. It is a secret shared only between husband and wife, more intimate than any physical scar. She breaks then, all the careful control she has maintained for 20 years dissolving. She runs to him, throws her arms around him, weeps against his chest. You are home, she says. You are finally home. Forgive me for testing you, but I had to be sure. After so long, after so many disappointments, I had to be absolutely certain. They embrace, and Homer's description is beautiful and heartbreaking. He compares their reunion to sailors who have been shipwrecked seeing land after days of drowning in stormy seas. To them, the land is welcome, so welcome was her husband to Penelope, and she would not let him go. It is a simile that works on multiple levels. Penelope has been shipwrecked too, metaphorically, drowning in uncertainty and grief. Odysseus is her dry land, her safety, her home. That night, they talk. They lie together in the bed that Odysseus built around the olive tree, and they tell each other everything. Odysseus describes his wanderings, the Cyclops, the Lotus Eaters, Circe, the underworld, all of it. Penelope describes her own ordeal, the suitors, the shroud trick, the years of pressure and threat, how she kept hope alive when every rational thought said he was dead. They talk until dawn, making up for 20 years of separation in a single night of words. But even now, the story is not quite finished. The next day, Odysseus must face the families of the suitors he killed. More than 100 young men are dead, and their fathers and brothers want justice. They gather outside the palace, armed and angry, and a battle threatens. Odysseus, Telemachus, and a handful of loyal men prepare to fight again. They are outnumbered, but they have fought against worse odds. And then Athena intervenes directly, appearing in the sky with Zeus's authority. Enough, she commands. Enough blood has been spilled. Let there be peace between Odysseus and the families of Ithaca. The suitors brought their deaths upon themselves through their arrogance and violation of sacred hospitality. Let this cycle of violence end here. The families, awed by divine command, lower their weapons. Odysseus, equally awed, agrees to peace. Treaties are sworn. Compensation will be paid from Odysseus's treasure. He is wealthy now from the Phaeacians' gifts. He can afford to be generous. The families of the suitors will not seek revenge. Odysseus will rule Ithaca again, and there will be peace. And so the Odyssey ends, not with glory or triumph, but with exhaustion and compromise and the gradual restoration of normalcy. Odysseus has reclaimed his kingdom, his wife, his son. He has killed his enemies and purified his house. But he is not the same man who left for Troy 20 years ago. How could he be? He has seen too much, suffered too much, killed too many. The Odyssey is not a story about a hero going on an adventure and returning unchanged. It is a story about what war and trauma do to people, about how difficult it is to come home after experiencing horrors, about how the very concept of home becomes complicated when you have been gone so long that everything familiar has become strange. Homer's final image is of Odysseus and Penelope together, finally at peace, finally able to rest. But Teiresias's prophecy lingers. Odysseus will have one more journey to make, carrying an oar inland until he reaches people who have never seen the sea, who mistake his oar for a winnowing fan used to separate grain. There he must make sacrifices to Poseidon, finally appeasing the god who has hated him for so long. Only then will his wanderings truly end. Only then can he die peacefully in old age, surrounded by a prosperous people. That journey lies in the future, outside the boundaries of Homer's epic. The Odyssey ends with reunion and rest, with a household restored, with a marriage rekindled after 20 years of absence. It is not a perfect ending. Too much has been lost. Too many have died. The violence of the suitors' slaughter leaves a stain that cannot be completely washed away. But it is an ending, and after so much wandering, after so much suffering, an ending is enough. The power of the Odyssey lies not in its monsters or its magic, though those elements have captured imaginations for 3,000 years. The power lies in its humanity. At its core, this is a story about longing for home, for family, for belonging. Odysseus's greatest enemy is not Poseidon or the Cyclops or the Sirens. His greatest enemy is distance, separation, the cruel fact that you can be alive and still be lost, can be trying to return and still never arrive. Every delay, every setback, every moment he spends trapped on Calypso's island or wandering in strange lands, is a moment stolen from his life, from his family, from the place where he belongs. And Penelope's story is equally powerful. She is not merely waiting passively for her husband to return. She is fighting her own war, defending her household with the only weapons available to her, cleverness, delay, the strategic use of hope and doubt. Her trick with the shroud is as brilliant as any of Odysseus's stratagems. Her testing of the disguised Odysseus is as careful as any military reconnaissance. She is his equal in intelligence, and their reunion is not just the return of a warrior to his wife but the rejoining of two minds that match each other perfectly. The Odyssey has survived for 3 millennia because it speaks to something universal in human experience. We all want to go home. We all struggle with obstacles that seem insurmountable. We all face the temptation to give up, to accept comfort in exile rather than continuing the difficult journey back to where we belong. And we all know the fear that home might have changed so much in our absence that we will no longer recognize it, or that it will no longer recognize us. The story resonates differently in different eras. Ancient Greeks heard it as a tale about hospitality and the relationship between mortals and gods, about the importance of cleverness and endurance. Medieval audiences saw it as an allegory of the soul's journey toward redemption. Modern readers find in it themes of trauma and recovery, of how difficult it is for soldiers to return from war, of how home can be both a physical place and a psychological state that must be fought for and reclaimed. Homer, whoever he was, blind bard or collective tradition or brilliant individual poet, understood something fundamental about storytelling. He understood that the journey matters more than the destination, that delays and obstacles reveal character, that reunion is meaningless without separation. He understood that heroes are not perfect but flawed, not invulnerable but wounded, not always right but always human. Odysseus lies, kills, makes terrible mistakes, gets his men killed through pride and poor judgment. He is clever but not always wise. He survives not because he is the strongest or the bravest but because he refuses to stop trying, refuses to accept exile as permanent, refuses to forget who he is and where he comes from. And in the end, that is the real meaning of the Odyssey. It is not about monsters or gods or magical adventures, though those elements make the story memorable. It is about identity, about remaining yourself through suffering, about knowing who you are even when everyone else has forgotten. Odysseus spends 10 years wandering, 10 years being nobody. He even calls himself nobody to the Cyclops, but he never forgets that he is Odysseus of Ithaca. That knowledge, that certainty of identity, is what brings him home. Not favorable winds. Not divine help. But the unwillingness to become anyone other than himself. The wine-dark sea remembers everything. It remembers the ships that sailed to Troy and the ships that tried to sail home. It remembers the men who drowned and the one man who refused to drown. And 3,000 years after Homer sang this tale for the first time, the sea still remembers. Because some stories are too true to forget. Some journeys echo forever. And some heroes, despite all their flaws and failures, find their way home. This is the story of Odysseus. This is the Odyssey. And it ends, as all the best stories do, with a beginning, a man and a woman together again, a family restored, a kingdom at peace, and the promise of days ahead that are theirs to shape. The wandering is over. The war is finished. The hero is home. And that, after everything, is enough.